Hey everybody, Mick here. It is day four of that social distancing thing going on. About Friday afternoon, I decided to come home, and this is my hanging out at the house sort of attire. But what we're going to talk about is going to be what's been going on here recently. About the last couple of weeks. Several weeks. I've been working on some vlogs. One's about mental health stigma, and the other is about pathological shame. But I thought it's important to address today's ongoing panic, and that's the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to discuss some reasons why psychologically people are reacting in these hoarding mentalities, and what causes these behaviors. First, I just want to say that I'm not a social psychologist or a sociologist, but when it comes to explaining the collective behavior of groups, that's not my background. But my training and background deals with individual psychology, and those behaviors which are internally motivated, along with interpersonal interactions, that one-on-one, caused by either biological or environmental situations, or what we call antecedents. So we're going to keep it on that level, and talk about why Sizemore might be out there doing all those dastardly deeds, hoarding toilet paper and hand sanitizer at the expense of others. So, but now, if you're interested in a social slant, refer to either Philip Zimbardo or Albert Bandera. I've studied their work and their findings extensively for years. Dr. Bandera did the famous Bobo doll experiment, where learning and behaviors come from social viewing and those motivations. And Dr. Zimbardo, who I really enjoy reading and studying, he did the infamous Stanford prison experiment, where authority and groupthink just took over the collective whole. So, but my focus is more on the individual and what is perhaps going on inside and between individual others, namely their brains and bodies, which drives their behavior. So what's going on? I got half of my brain here, which is a lot. Seems like what these hoarders and people are out there doing, just using half the brain. So what we're going to look at is what may be behind these panic-like actions of hoarding, and where does it come from? Not everyone's reacting in such a fashion, just a few. But before we get into that, I've done some research on this subject quite extensively here, and I've looked at the research through professionally written articles and journal articles about the coronavirus, and no, I haven't used social media as a source, just what we call peer-reviewed articles, journals and documents, which basically state the facts and not so much opinions, okay? So what exactly is coronavirus? It's been around since the 1960s, and it was first discovered in chickens. So much for chicken soup being the panacea of all ailments. We use chicken soup to cure everything. The virus itself is what we call a single-stranded RNA organism, which, if you remember from biology or microbiology, DNA transcribes and RNA transmits. So that's very important for some of you, what's going on behind this. And if you have some questions, just email me, and I can explain a little bit more. This virus, it affects the animal's respiratory system in both birds and mammals. But what's interesting is in pigs and cows, it causes diarrhea. So I guess it's the pigs and cows out there that are buying up all that toilet paper. But this virus, it has this affinity for a certain enzyme. I'm not going to go down that rabbit trail on what that enzyme and how it links with the RNA and what it needs from it. But in human, it sets up shop in the lungs, okay? Our respiratory system, our bronchial system. Scientists think that the coronavirus originally came from bats. And there are like 5 different strains of it, but I'm not going to go in that direction. So what we're dealing with is basically a later version of what we call SARS. I don't know if you remember that or not. The severe acute respiratory syndrome that we had a while back. Now, COVID-19, COVID-19 stands for coronavirus disease, and the 19 represents the year 2019 of its discovery. What is interesting, when I learned it was named corona because under a microscope, and I've looked at all the microscopic pictures and looked at all the molecule breakdowns and all that stuff, it looks like a crown, and corona is a Latin term for crown. So no, a scientist wasn't drinking a Mexican beer while performing an experiment and derived an epiphany from the bottle that he was drinking out of. So, but the SARS virus and the COVID-19 are almost genetically similar, and scientists believe there was a mutation in that. Whether or not it was produced in a lab is conspiratorial speculation and not the purpose of this vlog. But if you know something about RNA and you know what, and it's a transcriptor, you might want to look into that. Some interesting things, but I'm not going to get into that. With that being said, all living organisms want to survive, okay? And to do so, they'll mutate themselves based upon preservation, survival of the fittest, okay? Especially if antibiotics are used to destroy the virus, then it will make microbiological measures to mutate. It'll take those microbiological measures to mutate a resistance, producing similar yet different and resistant protein chains of amino acids, okay? But since this is a new threat, there is not a vaccine available as of yet, which I believe some feeling helpless and powerless, which is getting into what we're going to talk about, why people are reacting this way. Now, researchers feel that they can get a vaccine up and going here based upon the SARS template that they used. And for this, it's going to go south of the equator here because their fall and winter months are coming up during our spring and summer months. Then we'll be able to evaluate the efficaciousness of the new vaccine before we enter our infectious months later this year. But there's going to be a spike coming up here, and hopefully it'll be a lot flatter than what's projected. Now, the transmission of the virus is transmitted through either sneezing or coughing, and another human within approximately a 6-foot distance inhales the respiratory droplets. That's why they're wanting that 6-foot separation, because typically when you sneeze or cough, those air droplets can go out before they fall about 6 foot. But also, I've said they're not quite sure of this. They can't say it for certain, but it may be possible to transmit communally, meaning contact with surfaces, tables, doorknobs, stuff like that. And another interesting note is scientists believe if you're asymptomatic, meaning you don't show the symptoms, if you're asymptomatic, patients may also be infectious, passing along the COVID-19 virus while showing no signs of infection. The incubation period is anywhere from 2 to 14 days, and with the average appearance around the 5 or 6 day you'll get the symptoms around that 5 or 6 day. Now, epidemiologists and infectious disease experts, they state that the recovery periods are about 2 weeks for healthy people and patients, and up to 6 weeks for the susceptible populations like the elderly, those with diabetes, hypertension, coronary heart disease, just to name a few. If you have respiratory problems, if you've had pneumonia in the past, that could be an indicator that you're more susceptible. The reason that there's a more profound effect in the host lungs is because the virus is drawn to particular cells in the respiratory tract and the lung, which contains a target-rich environment for a certain enzyme that the COVID-19 attaches to it. It has this affinity for it, we can say. But if you're a cow or a pig, then you would be pooping a lot, your brains out, because that enzyme is found in their digestive tract. So there's some background on the virus. I just kind of wanted to get out there, and so without getting too technical. Now I'm going to switch gears to the human behavior and some things I want to talk about why people are acting the way that they're acting. What has caused this hoarding-like panic is this primordial activation of the fear or threat circuit located in our limbic area and our brain stem. I'm still a little sore in that shoulder, but I brought a half a brain here to show you. This is a half a brain, the left side, but hey, our limbic system, see this orange area right here? It's in the very center, and this is what we call the threat detection center. And then the brain stem is down low here. The pons is on top. And if you've ever watched that football movie with Adam Sandler, it's pretty funny. I'll think of it shortly. Is located down there. This acting in a very aggressive way, that alligators have. It just slips my mind is all. But that's where it's. What we're talking about, this center here, the orange you can see back in here, and then down on the brain stem, and the other part. Wow. So what happens is these parts override our higher parts of what we call our cerebral cortex in the front. Here, it's the higher echelons of our cerebral cortex and the prefrontal cortex. So this typically will override those areas and shut down that rationale, okay? What occurs is when the brain detects threat, it's an automatic response of the sympathetic nervous system, which your heart rate will get up, that along with the amygdala and the hypothalamus. Our heart rate increases, our breathing expands, pores on our limbs open up, our legs and arms will open up, and that's why sometimes we get goosebumps. Our pupils will dilate, even though we don't know it. We're able to see more panoramically, and our digestive system slows. In other words, we feel this. We feel like we're keyed up in a certain way. Now, when something like a futuristic threat is felt, much like the pandemic we're experiencing, we do not get that full-blown acceleration of our system. Just a milder form. It produces anxiety and angst in most of us, okay? Very few of us will we have that generalized anxiety disorder to where it becomes just an overpowering feeling or sensation. Our bodies and brains are wired to act out in what we call a fight, flight, freeze, flag, or faint mode. Okay, these are 5 modes. I know most of you have heard of the 3, the flight, fight, and freeze, but there's also what we call the flag and the faint mode in response to perceived threat. Now, see, when I say a perceived threat, it doesn't have to be a real threat. Just something that the person perceives in order to activate the system. Have you ever been so scared you can't think or talk? Sometimes when people get up on stage, their minds just go flat and they can't utter a word. Again, this is your brain responding to perceived threats, and being able to talk is not this survival mechanism. We don't need to talk to survive, and our brains switch all modes to survival is what happens, which sometimes thinking is not a part of, as we've seen. Just running or fighting is what's automatic. And what has happened is this. Since viewers of certain media outlets and social pages have placed their expert and protective trust in these mediums, it was not difficult to cause a motivated reaction of fear or unavoidable threat. Meaning, if I have placed trust in someone or something, which tells me, hey, Sizemore, there's really nothing you can do about protecting yourself from this pathogen, then anxiety and eventually panic will ensue as time progresses. I said this earlier, feeling hopeless or helpless is total anathema for a human being. It's something that we don't like. We try to get rid of it as quick as we can, that feeling of hopelessness or helplessness, okay? With this uncontrollable state in mind, I will try to do something which lessens the fear and the angst, a behavior which tries to regulate my sympathetic nervous system back to balance. That thing that keys me up and gets me revved up, tries to get it back to homeostasis. Let me give you an example. Let's say I'm hopelessly and helplessly trapped standing in the middle of a railroad track with a train coming. Here comes this train, which is pretty much what has been presented to us by these mediums, okay? This is an unstoppable train. In some pitied or vulnerable way, I will try to shield myself, my body and my face with my arms, perhaps twisting my body and going like this just before the train hits me to lessen impact. I will try to shield my body away instead of standing arms, like wide open, saying, here I am, give you a big hug and kiss, Mr. Locomotive, doing 80 miles an hour. And this action is an inconsequential action or behavior, hoping to derive some minuscule sort of sense of control over the situation. So I really hope you're following me here, that these people out doing all this hoarding and buying up, it is an inconsequential behavior for them. And they're acting in this panic-laden hoarder mentality, using their money to somehow spare themselves the onslaught of this pernicious and virulent disease. And it is very virulent. It's very easy to catch. But I kind of want to give you an example here. It's it's a lot like superstition too, as far as trying to control things, like wearing our precious sports team hat, knowing it has special powers, propelling our team to victory. It gives us a sense of control and contribution. In this case, hoarding is our inconsequential behavior, or maybe superstitious act, designed to protect us from perhaps the inevitable. Fear is the emotion. Panic is the secondary emotion, okay? And hoarding becomes the behavior. So the basis of this is fear and panic, and it's for trying to control this inconsequential behavior to try to control, okay? Another reason for this aping, of others, and everybody's sort of copying everybody when it got out. We have these things, what is known as mirror neurons in our brain, and they're specifically motor neurons, but they're called mirror neurons. They were discovered by accident when a guy was eating a banana and a monkey saw him, and they saw where his brain was firing. The actuality parts of the brain that, like the monkey was eating. Okay. How many times? An example here is how many times have you yawned because someone else yawned? And when you're asked about it, it wasn't because you're tired, but because someone else did that very same behavior. So that's mirror neurons at work. You can do an experiment. Stand on a busy sidewalk and look up and stare, and have someone count the others who repeat your behavior for no reason of their own other than copying your action. People become panic-like because of a herd mentality. Okay? Soldiers in combat will fire their weapons without anything to shoot at because others are doing the same. It gives them that relief, that sense of doing something when it's inconsequential. Let one or two birds take off in a startled flight, or one or two deer bolt from the herd with no provocation, and then all exhibit the same behavior. The flocks and the herds, they will all exhibit, they'll copy those two. These behaviors are derived from the lower animalistic portions of our brain, which I showed you, the brain stem and the what we call the amygdala, the limbic area, in those parts. In the center of the brain, they've detected what a perceived fear due to the actions of others, which are cut off again from the higher prefrontal regions and controlled by the mirror neurons. So I kind of hope I explained that okay, and that's it pretty much in a nutshell of why this is going about. And I just want to say, hey, I hope everybody's okay and stays okay. And agapecounselor@outlook.com if you want to email me. Maranatha, and have a great week.